welcome everyone. Greatly appreciate you giving up your time to come here to join us tonight. We've got what I would label prestigious presenters tonight. Dr. Kristi Nord and Dr. Joan, I still have a hard time, Bauernfiend. Fine?
Fine.
Fine. I'm Glenn Beekline. I work at the central office at Greater Jasper, and this is the second learning event we had. We had one in March that was very successful, where we focused more on sort of the legal or the illegal aspects of social media and the internet. Our guests tonight, our presenters tonight, are going to focus more on what screen time, what social media, what all these devices do to developing young minds and brains.
It's very, very important to know and for people to be aware of. And I get it. I have 4 kids also. They're from 8 to 16. So it's like, I just need 15 minutes. So, I get it. But, and it's extremely, extremely difficult to, to watch every second. I've heard so many just of my friends and patients saying, okay, but I tell them it's turned off at this time. And then you change your, you turn off your Wi-Fi or what have you, and then they sneak in there and turn the Wi-Fi back on, and all after you've gone to bed, right? There's all these ways around it. So that's where I think too, educating the kids on this is important. So what's super, super critical is that the young brain is growing so astronomically fast that a year of exposure to something between the ages of 0 and 3 can have a tremendous impact on you 20 years down the road, right? Because of what you weren't developing or what new things developed that aren't going to serve you well later. And so in the brain, there's always new neural connections that are being formed, and those are happening the most rapidly in early life, but they're still happening throughout adolescence and the teen years. And so the brain, the way it kind of works with its connections is, let's say that I have never played a musical instrument, and all of a sudden I decide right now I want to go learn how to play the banjo. I've never played a stringed instrument before, but guess what? My brain is going to start making some new connections as I learn how to do that. And then say I haven't done calculus in 20 years, which is probably true. The part of my brain that does calculus, it's going to start to kind of trim off the branches there, and we don't really use this area anymore, we're going to cut it back. So that's really how the brain works. But in a child, it's really magnified. And there are a lot of things that we develop that we're not aware of at all that are really critical in children. So, and I'll cover some of those as I go through a few areas there. But I was also really, really just flabbergasted, honestly, when I started looking into this, and that the average teenager spends over 7 hours a day on screens, and that's not including like school time. So that means either most of the evening or half the evening and half their sleep time, right? So that's almost a full-time job, right? Every day that they're spending that much time in their teenage years. And I've heard so many people say, I realized that my child played, I don't even know all the games anymore. Xbox. 40 plus hours last week. And yeah, that is a full-time job. So when you think about that, how many hours, if you're 40 hours a week at a job, how much that doing something that much could impact a child and their development, and very much like what are they missing out on during that time. So I think really one thing that's extremely important to touch on is the mental health impacts of screen time. And I think you could have a whole 4-hour session on social media, so I'm going to kind of skip over that, but there's a lot of dimensions of this. But there are several studies that very, very, very clearly link higher levels of screen time to increased symptoms of depression in adolescents. It's very, very, very clear. And then it gets into more of, if you delve into social media,
Yeah.
usually anxiety
The
rates
type,
skyrocket.
right? We're not just talking about sitting in front of a TV.
Yeah.
That used to be, oh, you're gonna, wet your reins sitting in
Yeah.
front of the television. Like, what teenager sits in front of the television, really?
Right. Which a TV is actually, well, now they're all smart TVs and actually computers, but,
Right.
just regular mainstream, what's being broadcast, is typically more controllable and fixed to the wall, and you can monitor that easier than a small device you
Right.
can slip off wherever, right?
Yeah.
But there's, so besides higher rates of depression linked with, it's directly correlated, more screen time, higher rates of depression, higher risk of depression, but it's very, very measurable, the lack of empathy that you see in youth these days. Really, and some studies, they've shown recently, what the numbers turned out to be was that 70% of youth lacked emotional intelligence because they're talking to and interacting with devices instead of other people. And so what we're talking about, the things that you learn just by interactions, you really learn to realize that, oh, her face means she's happy. If you're interacting with a device, you don't ever learn that, right? So when are you going to learn that? If you're missing out on that in childhood. And then anxiety, so the anxiety rates overall, so just one study I had here was in 1985, 18% of teens said they had overwhelming anxiety. And in 2016, so before the pandemic even, that number was 41%. So that's a pretty big increase. And actually there was an article in the Journal of American Medical Association last month that showed between 2009 and 2019, so before the pandemic, which is a whole other can of worms for mental health, but that ER visits for self-harm or suicide attempts were increased by 4 or 5 times in adolescents. So from 2009 to 2019, we've got a 4 or 5-fold increase over that 10-year period in self-harm and suicide attempts in teens, and that's astronomical.
It's one thing as far as the content, what it is that they're seeing, but then also the format in which it's presented. So as far as, this lack of empathy and connection, we're not talking about Mr. Rogers. We're talking about a 30-second, a 45-second rapid fire clip about something and then on to the next thing. And then it's different, and it's different again. And so it's the nature in how it's edited, produced, in addition to the content that it is.
Definitely, and I think we're barely even scratching the surface of the content for that really too. But on that same note, really, the cyberbullying is out of hand for so many reasons. It's really, really clear that, people will say things electronically that they would never, ever say in person, right? So you couple that with the lack of inhibition that you see in teens, and then there you go, right? So they can get in trouble really, really quickly. But, and I think what's hard too is that, when you didn't have these devices, once you went home, you were away from whoever's bullying you or whatever trouble there was. And then now, you can't get away from it. It's just always there. So I think that's really, really difficult.
And I think something for us, as parents and adults, it's a little difficult to think or to even really understand on their level, because with them and their generation, that's normal. That's how they communicate, or that is what they're seeing, online or social media or screen time and all of this. That is how you communicate. So then that's how they communicate with one another. So then that gets that's the norm of how they interact. And so some of these things where we're looking at them why would you say that? Why would you do that? Well, that's what they see as normal, and that's what they all see as normal, so then that's what they do as being, this is the social norm.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then too, there's been a lot of studies of that are really starting to show just measurable changes too in brain structures. And really when you surpass that 7 hours a day of screen time, that's where you really start seeing measurable changes in the structure of the brain. And so if your average teen is getting more than 7 hours a day, then our average teen is having, probably more than half of teens are having structural changes in their brain. And we don't know what is that going to mean for them when they're 70 years old. That their brain grew differently in a different way. And it's not in a good way. It's usually that parts of the brain that do the work have shrunk. And so really some of the bigger areas that the studies have shown, and I can give you more of this information if you need to, but just trying to kind of summarize it, there's been really there's underdevelopment in some higher areas, kind of higher complexity skills of the brain. So you have thinning of the cortex, so the surface of the brain, right? In areas that are involved in language development and reading skills and social skills. And really the specific ones are like complex memory and coding, empathy, and understanding facial and emotional expressions. But you can see that on an MRI scan that since more than 7 hours of screen time a day.
And correct me, Dr. Nord, that we refer to that as executive function.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
Part of it. So multiple areas though, language and emotional processing too. So it's multiple areas. But also, there are a lot of areas there too. And it's, what's, I think really, really interesting is even if you see, say, a 2-year-old in a stroller and they're just staring at a screen as they're being pushed, at that age, you really should be watching the tree go by and seeing how does the world move in relation to me and really taking in the world and not staring at a screen. And there's so many systems basically in your brain that are kind of missing out on the normal world experience.
And just building your awareness of your external self. And so all of us kind of, I guess I could liken it to my interpretation of, okay, you can discuss space, okay, so how far I am to this wall. I have my own kind of understanding of how far that is, but that's unique to me, and how all of my experiences and how I've developed up till now has evolved for my understanding of that, versus if a kiddo or someone else's is different than mine. So yes, there is a literal distance, but as far as what that means to me is different than what that feels like or what that is to somebody else. And the way that is comprised is based on all of the interactions as far as if something is within my reach or isn't it. If my eyes need to move a certain way in order to see this singly, eyes have to converge, look in, diverge, look out, and do that in relation, and it gives brain an understanding of where that thing is. So that's just one little tiny little piece of how this varying, call it, enriched environment or just moving in your surroundings gives you this feedback of, okay, this is, my eyes have had to do, look in closer, so that must be closer to me than eyes diverging, looking farther, so then that's beyond. That those kinds of activations of eye movement goes right into your perception of where things are. And so when we're too far imbalanced with here, right, like here to here, that's not being most fully developed. Not that it isn't at all, but not most fully developed.
Are you seeing anything in your clinic like kiddos that are having a ton of screen time? Are you seeing specific problems with that?
I would say the biggest concern is impulsivity. As far as to directly correlate it with an eye movement, I think it is a bit more broad as far as having content feed you, being stimulated externally versus stimulating yourself internally. And as far as, well, how is holding a book here, how is that harder than they'll hold their device here for way longer than they'll hold a book there? Okay, because the stimulus is coming from outside instead of them having to generate the stimulus to scan, to read, to decode, to the thousands of things that have to happen in order for this activity of reading to be enjoyable and to get that movie going. And all the things require input rather than, I don't need to do anything. I'm just consuming and just letting myself be stimulated. And then getting to, as children, can very well be prone to be overstimulated by this, which I'm sure we'll touch on that as well. So it is just this, everything has to be fast. And I don't take the initiative to even entertain something that requires more of a problem-solving approach.
Well, and the research completely supports that. Even just more than 2 hours of screen time a day, you see deficits in attention. And usually, again, the children measurably perform less well on reading tests as well. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting too if you even just think about it in other terms as, and I'm like, I am not that old, but whenever I was in middle school and high school, like it was before Google, we had to go to the library, look in the card catalog, find the book, look at the table of contents, find the chapter, skim the chapter, and find the
index,
information,
find the word, alphabet,
yes. And so, right, how long, what skills are required to do that versus now Google.
Right.
How far is...
Halfway spell the word correctly. And
it still gives you
did
the
you
answer
mean this?
immediately, right? Exactly, right. So, and we had to go, search those things out on our own and take our own initiative, and then it's just right there, right now, all the time, whatever you're wanting at your fingertips, right? So I think it's in multiple levels there, but too,
yes.
I mean, these, all of these gaming apps, literally every website has psychologists who they hire. How do we design this page and how do we make this so that we keep folks here as long as possible? And so they've hired psychologists to track you on their website. I mean, literally they have, and they all do that, and that's the name of their game because they make more money the longer you're there and the more you click on and so forth.
The first time I saw one of my kids play like Fortnite, I guess it was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you even look at this? Like I can't even look at this. For my brain is hurting, just trying to understand and process what is going on here, because it's very bright, it's very colorful, it changes viewpoints all quickly, sound, and all of that is by design, to keep that stimulation happening, to keep the engagement.
It's like constantly pushing your reward system in the brain, right? And that's why, and the video showed the college student who had to drop out because he was gaming all night and he couldn't go to his classes and stuff because he was just completely addicted. And it is a true addiction because it is pushing your reward button in your brain, and it's designed to do that. And like we were saying, is the younger kiddos really don't have that frontal lobe executive function to say, oh my gosh, I have been scrolling on Facebook for 45 minutes and I have to do my homework now, right? They don't even have that impulse control necessarily. And then actually as you see kiddos having more screen time, their impulse control is less and less. So it's kind of this vicious process there, right? So, so really multiple areas of the brain that we see changes and deficits and structural, real, measurable changes in the brain with increased screen time. But another thing I wanted to mention is just really with mental health too is kids who play violent video games have the worst changes in inhibitory control inhibition. Very serious difficulty with, kind of controlling and inhibiting themselves, to stop doing a lot of different impulsive tasks. So that's one thing that's really, and I've been trying to figure out how to explain. There's a couple of networks in the brain. There's one, like, I'll kind of just try to illustrate it with this. There's called a default mode network. So if I'm just sitting here, or Joan was just sitting here waiting for me to show up. She's just kind of sitting here and her brain's just kind of thinking about whatever today and this, that, and the other. So it's kind of your default mode. So that's why it's default mode network. So you just kind of, your brain's just kind of in its idle, right? It's kind of idling, right? So kids who have a lot of screen time and a lot of that overstimulation, their default mode network is different. And you don't see the same areas light up that you would in just a normal person if you look at that. So really the whole circuitry, your idling, if you will, of your brain is different when you throw a lot of screen time in. So it really can affect it on a lot of levels.
And it's almost, to the behaviors and some things, they don't even know what to do.
Right. Yes, exactly.
I don't understand.
Right.
Not.
Right.
Because some of therapy and some of our therapeutic activity is, okay, take a deep breath, look soft, open periphery, just, and sometimes I'll kind of liken it to, how you take a big stretch, how do you wake up out of bed, you take a big stretch, and then you kind of release it. That like relaxed, kind of soft feeling. It takes so much coaching, if you will, to try to get that concept to go, to be under, to sink in, that it's always this active go, go, go. And it's definitely prioritized as far as in a therapeutic setting. The lack of going is just as important as the going. That it isn't just the doing that's rewarded, it's the not doing
Exactly.
that's rewarded.
Yep. Exactly. On the addiction theme, it was interesting. I found a survey that asked teens, about the internet. It was interesting, and it said over half of U.S. teens said they could not function on a daily basis without the internet. So that's a little frightening, right? If you can't function at all without the internet, and really also. With the addiction, like we mentioned earlier, it can be really, really profoundly damaging in so many ways. So let's see, a couple other things too is really there's so many damaging things kiddos can be exposed to on the internet and so forth. Even, if you Google naked person, just Google that and you will get all sorts of things you never wanted to see. I did not know that. You think, oh, Google might be safe as long as I have, this policing thing. It won't let my kid go to bad websites. No, Google's not safe at all. Even just itself, right? So not even clicking on something from Google, right? So you really have to watch the kiddos on all of the. There's so many things they're exposed to so early, and we touched on that the last talk about if someone, anyone under 18 texts an inappropriate picture to anyone else, now you have child pornography on your phone and it is a crime. So there are so many things like that kids can be exposed to, so really have to monitor that, and very much I would love for us to, and I would love to hear from you all, like what Joan had mentioned earlier, like what is the screen time replacing? What are the kids missing out on? one big thing is creativity, and I had read something once about, would we have any of the things that Einstein or Edison invented if they grew up with
screens, yeah.
Yes, because they didn't have that they wouldn't have had the idle time to think, right? And to create.
Yeah, for me, definitely, it's knowing how to get somewhere. That they are on their devices anytime they go anywhere. And so, obviously when they start to drive, then they'll have to figure it out. But I mean, just knowing how to get from here to there, because they're not watching like where we turn and what's what. I remember just recently, there was a conversation about like in a grocery store and looking for a certain thing. And it took a second for that to click with the kiddo as far as, where we get the stuff or this, or we go to get, food. Like, because they're not even aware of what's going on when they're there. So just an overall lack of awareness.
Yep.
And being able to just, like I was talking about, kind of that problem solving sort of thing, where if it's like maybe a multi-step sort of process, like that takes a lot of brain power almost, because they're just not accustomed to really having to think through this logical step sort of sequence.
Right.
And it's not that they can't.
Right.
It's just it's not as developed as what it should be for generations, older than us. That was,
The entire
kids.
map was in your
Yeah.
head. And
Oh,
you
yeah.
knew how to read a map, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it's
Yeah.
kind of like the same concept of, I love the kids in the younger grades aren't allowed to use calculators until they know all their multiplication facts, right? Because if you always had a calculator and you never had any reason to just learn the multiplication facts on your own, why would you have, right? Just let the calculator do everything for you. So, and you do need to be able to do those functions yourself as well. So, but there actually, I just saw a news article, that there was a school bus in Michigan that the driver passed out, and thankfully a kiddo just a few rows back, who I'm sure he thought he had the worst parents on earth because he did not have a cell phone and everyone else did. He was there just being, right? Just sitting and being, right? Not distracted by anything because he didn't have one. And so he saw that the driver just slumped over, and he was able to jump up there and stop the bus, and some bystanders helped and so forth. But they interviewed all the other kiddos on the bus, and all the other kids were on phones or had their music going and were not paying attention, to a life-threatening situation. They would have had no idea, So I think that's a really great example of the reality that you're missing out on.
Right.
But yeah, no, I would love to hear from you guys about your thoughts on, what is the screen time replacing, and what are the kiddos missing out on when they're doing the 7 hours of screen time?
I can say something on maybe what I think they kind of lose as they get older. So I'm a social worker here at the high school, and so I'm going to kind of make it mental health related a little bit. So I feel like we see a lot of I just don't have any friends here. So a couple years ago, this is going to sound really bad, I started using their social media against them, and I'll say hey, get up to your last Instagram post as long as it's appropriate. How many people liked your Instagram post or hearted your Instagram post? So this one girl in particular who's trying to tell me I have no friends here, I don't feel like I fit in here. 315 people had liked her last Instagram post.
Yeah.
Gorgeous, girl, you're gorgeous, look at you. And so I started going, and I'm what about this girl? She commented, she said you were pretty, what about this girl? Talk to her in class. Oh gosh, no, not doing that. So almost just when we're little and we're playing on the playground, we have that social interaction, but somewhere along the lines when we put screens in front of them, we start to lose that connectedness, what is true connectedness. Mm-hmm. So I just always thought that was when you look at hierarchy of needs, it's almost our fake Instagram, Facebook world has trumped all of our other things, and that's how we feel valued.
Yeah, and almost it's sort of, we want them to understand that that's not real.
Right. Exactly.
But then also when somebody comments like, that's pretty, that's not real.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, well, shoot, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe that was real.
Right.
But now it's, trying to make a real connection with something that isn't real. That kind of is a little counterintuitive a little bit.
Well, and I think we all very deeply experienced our basic human need for companionship and togetherness and just even the power of being at a concert with thousands of people and how wonderful that is, and or for most people anyway. But you're absolutely correct. And the Surgeon General, I think, just declared this, what is it, epidemic of loneliness, right? But we're more connected than ever, so how can we be so lonely? But our brains are very much wired to be together for real, not through the phone or iPad or what have you, right? And so in that type of situation too, that's where I would question, okay, how many hours a day is she investing in electronics versus real life, right?
Yeah.
So, that's really hard.
And something I just remembered just now, as far as another visual concern that I was reading through, it doesn't really come through my door, but as far as the rates of nearsightedness are rising because of being right here, and that is kind of averse to our biological makeup, that's not what we're meant to do, but that's what we are kind of rerouting our system to do. And so then our body compensates for that by becoming nearsighted.
I think as a teacher, something that I tell my kids all the time, they're not actually learning, they're parroting things back.
Yes.
So especially with choir, I do a ton of like, repeat this. And they can repeat it, but then the next day, they don't. They don't remember it. Or like today, I had a girl, literally, she knew the song. So she was on her iPad, she forgot, or phone, I didn't see it. She didn't turn her sound off. And I kept hearing something wrong. And finally one of the girls was like, are you watching a video? She's watching a video, still singing, just.
Wow.
And I also think in psychology, they don't take notes as much. And so I'm worried about tests a little bit. Because I think the ones that I can tell do score a lot better. I see it on tests. So they don't think for themselves. I feel like they have hindrances to learning.
There's actually some interesting data on, and we'll see how it changes over the years, if it changes, but even taking handwritten notes, typically your memory of whatever you wrote will be better than even something you type. So even if you're taking notes as typing, you'll still remember it better if you physically took the notes. So definitely, man, make them pull out a piece of paper. So write it down, you'll remember it better. But it's honestly, I think that there are more pathways, it's kind of sensory modalities that you're using to bring the message or the information to your brain that way. And I think it really, I think that's why it encodes better that way. But yeah, that's interesting.
Another sort of little connection that is like a little bit of a, what do you want to say, a saving grace, a salvation, is just there is still a priority for athletics that will propel at least the outside play to continue to keep that a prioritized piece of, their development, right? And so, at least the social structures of, screen time and devices and technology hasn't gotten to where we really can't feel the team because the kiddos aren't either interested or they're just not coordinated enough because their bodies are not developed in that way to perform.
And another thing too, I know a lot of kiddos sneak the iPad, phone, what have you, right, and into their room, whatever screen they're utilizing. And it's very clear across all the American Academy of Pediatrics and I forget what the Family Practice Association is, but across the board is a recommendation for no screens in the bedroom. And I know that's really hard to enforce always, but there's a lot of good reasons for it, really. And the blue light, really any light will inhibit melatonin production, which melatonin is how your brain puts you to sleep. And it's very critical for that, and for good deep sleep, for that melatonin production to be normal. So when you're staring at your phone before bedtime, really within 30 to 60 minutes before bedtime, it will change your melatonin output and the quality of your sleep. So, and I know that that's hard, but really trying to limit that before bedtime can improve the quality of sleep for the kiddos. So yeah. What questions do you guys have? I know we've talked a lot and thrown a lot of information out there.
You had talked about a balance. What would be a good balance of screen time for kids, just as parents? Like,
I didn't put it off, and I don't know if you want to just kind of look at
but what's the
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was going to pass around, and you can snap a photo if you'd like, just like some guidelines of number of hours per like an age range. And again, you know, I think we kind of overlook just like watching TV as being a screen. But as far as, you know, having just, it says here as far as keep, for adults, for teens adults, keep 2 to 4 hours of recreational screen use per weekday, take frequent screen breaks, and then set up screen-free times and make time for physical activity. So I can just kind of start this if you want to just have a look or snap a photo. And I kind of, it is, I think in having, and I think kids in general respond well to, okay, we're going to set a timer.
Yes.
Because when this timer goes off, then that's it. I think from little on, they're kind of, timers are set for where you have this much time to pick up, we have this much time to, you know, whatever. And so I know for my kiddos, I get very much less pushback when we agree we're going to have a timer set, and then when this goes off, then that's it. So when the timer goes off, we have that versus me saying, okay, you got 5 minutes. And then I come back when I feel like it's been 5 minutes, probably longer than that. Okay, it's time. And then it's a big eruption, you know. So, and then I think for just in general, to have a set, you know, from the beginning, okay, we're gonna do this. You can, you know, have your device, whatever. But at this time, we're gonna go do this. Or then it's time that we do this. Or kind of have something as a marker to say, then it's time to do other things beyond, you know, your screen time.
Yep. And if you want to even, if you just Google Academy of Pediatrics, like screen time recommendations, there are charts on there by age group. And they really, under age 2, they really don't recommend any screen time other than like FaceTime, you know, video chatting with relatives, right? And what's really interesting, you know, why would they say that? Because there's, you know, Sesame Street or what have you, you know, why not let, you know, an 18-month-old watch that or what have you? But what's interesting is that time period is extremely critical for language development, and they've shown that children do not learn the language skills, they don't acquire the language skills they need from watching any type of video as compared to from an actual person. So it's really, really fascinating, and I haven't seen any studies yet, but I feel like
it's to do with facial.
I feel like from
watching their mouth.
COVID that there were a lot of like very young kids who were speech delayed that were born like right at the beginning of the pandemic, and then at their daycares and their caregivers, like if they spent their whole day with someone with a mask, a lot of those kiddos are very speech delayed right now. It's really significant. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of studies and research is put out from that period of time. But that's the biggest reason is that if they're staring at a screen instead of interacting with a person, their language development is going to be impaired. So then from like age 2 to 5 years, they really want no more than an hour a day, and that they recommend that you should be, of course, very closely monitoring it, and that it should be high quality, right? Like Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers. I don't know all the newer ones now, but not just like a 4-year-old with free reign on YouTube, right?
I mean, even the newer ones.
Yeah,
I'm not so impressed.
They're not quite as good, so I still just love Mr. Rogers, but exactly. So then, you know, and then 6 to 12 years, again, it's like, what's the media type, right? So I think time on, you know, Xbox or what have you, and again, playing violent, you know, playing even 2 hours of violent video games, ages 6 to 12 is, I would say, 0 time. Because you're actually, your brain, when you're in those, and they're so realistic now that it's almost, that what's happening when you're in those very realistic graphics is your brain is rehearsing, and your brain is literally experiencing those, you know, what you're seeing. Your brain is rehearsing what's happening.
When you read any like biography or anything about professional athletes, they talk a lot about visualization, visualizing themselves, going through their emotions, going through their, you know, free throw, going through their batting stance. And to your brain, that isn't different. And seeing yourself, and I mean, it's almost like you see the muscles twitching as they're visualizing what's going on. And so that kind of input, you know, very much, and the more making it so realistic is very much like rehearsing these sorts of actions,
So I think it goes to quality too, you know, and I'm not going to say that like Wii Sports is bad or anything like that. Now, I think there are some very appropriate times for that. Like, I mean, if you live in an inner city somewhere where it's not even safe to go walk, if you are playing Wii Sports and moving, I think that's a great thing. They just, you know, it's interesting, I think, though, when sometimes people are like, oh, I'm really good at baseball, but it's on the Wii. It's like, well, okay, that's a good start, but let's, you know, go out and do this really with your body, right? Let's experience it more fully. So I think it has a lot to do really with the quality too. So not just, you know, unfettered, hey, here's 4 hours. So look at the quality of it. So, so yeah, that's a great question. But yeah, if you look up Academy of Pediatrics, like screen time recommendations, they have a nice chart by age group there. So yeah.
I guess maybe I have a question. You know, we're talking a lot about kids and screen time, but what about how adult use of screen time is impacting kids? Like, you think about feeding your infant or nursing, that left eye to left eye contact, but now the mom is scrolling on Facebook while she's nursing. Or, you know, the little kid for Mother's Day said, my mom's really good at texting. I really like, you know, like that's what he knows his mom for. That's how mom. So how are we as adults, because we're addicted?
Absolutely.
You know, impacting her, even if we're not necessarily letting the kids have a lot of screen time, but if we're modeling that, what kind of impact is that?
Right, and I think COVID kind of made all these things worse because, like, people were working virtually, right? Everything had to go on the computer, and that's where, like, we were really good about screen time for our kids, I felt, until COVID hit. And then they're literally on their computer, I don't know, 6-8 hours a day. And then I would be like, okay, you've had enough screen time for today. And then especially my son Alex was like, but that wasn't fun screen time. I'm like, I want my fun time now. It's like, what are we doing? So it became really difficult. And I think that a lot of those lines got very blurred. And it's the same thing. I think the same concepts, we all need to think about that. And that was going to be my first for like recommendations is put down your device, because you can tell your teenager, hey, no more than 4 hours a day, monitor yourself. But then if you say that and turn around and you're, you know, scrolling, they're gonna do what you do, not what you say there, right? So I think that's one of the biggest things is to put down our device and be present with others and think about that, like what are you
Right.
missing out on?
Right.
Like exactly what you were saying about the gal with 400 likes or whatever, but she doesn't have any friends, right? So, you know, what are you missing out on? And really just being present in the world, right? And going back to that.
And I think there's a little bit not realizing how important or how much it matters for that early interaction.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like, oh, they don't know. Like,
Yes,
they don't know that I'm on the phone, and they don't really know, you know.
I'm still, yeah, right.
Yeah, right. It's not like my 10-year-old who, you know, I can't get things by, like, you know, 18-month-old or whatnot. But it's just all of those, you know, the speech delay of not seeing your mouth. I mean, those things that seem so, is that really kind of frivolous? Like, does it really matter? Yes. It matters more than what you even can understand it matters. And having the connection of that kiddo looking at you to see if you saw and you were watching. And they looked at you and you were watching and you're nodding. Just that little interaction that they knew you were looking, you know.
Because I feel like eye contact is something I notice is different, but I think also, you know, if I'm at home and I have a little kid and they're telling me about their day, but I'm answering, but I'm not looking at the kid either.
Right.
If I'm,
And I think it's definitely a different, I think even little, you know, little, I think it's a totally different context if you're trying to get dinner started.
Right.
And they're in here
Right.
trying to ask you
But you can talk
this and this and this, and you
exactly.
can kind of glance and yes, okay, and keep going,
Yes.
than if I'm just doing this.
Yes.
That's totally separate manner of attention.
I think a lot of adults, I know my husband and me myself, we're kind of like reading the news or the sports. I mean, that's where people get their news and their sports anymore. It's
Right.
not the paper, or it's not good housekeeping anymore. It's all on your device. I know because Max sometimes will say, well, you're on yours, and we're like, he's like, I'm just reading the sports, you know. It's kind of like so we do have
Right.
phones in our faces
Sure.
a lot, like reading articles and stuff. So I don't know. So it's kind of hard to get rid of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think
because
that's
we
where
don't get
some
the
like,
paper or anything anymore.
I know, where I think that's
And we
where
don't
some
have the TV.
reflection though too, because it's the same thing. The news websites have psychologists who have laid it out. How long can they keep you on their page so they can sell more ads and so forth? I mean, so that I think it's really good to monitor your screen time too, you know, and that's something that I think everyone really being thoughtful and mindful about. Okay, how much time am I going to allot to this? And I really think we all need to do that.
Yeah.
Because you can spend really obscene amounts of time on it, so, yeah.
And to speak to some of the higher levels of stimulation, the higher the true, we talk about, you know, kind of almost an addiction, then the withdrawal.
Yeah, exactly.
And the attitudes, behaviors that
Yep.
come after we finally,
Exactly.
okay, it's done. I don't even know why I have to do this.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
And just this, you know, big eruption because,
And I think the more violent the game is, the angrier they are
Yep.
when you get them off there.
That's that inhibition control
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
Exactly, very
Yeah,
much so.
they can have a bad attitude when
With
they
that.
come off those.
Yep, exactly.
yeah.
And, you know, I think too, being, like, monitoring, you know, about your question of time, I think monitoring what they're doing, or if they're playing an online game, it can actually be quite hilarious. If my kids don't want me to touch the Minecraft because I mess it all up. But like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But, and they just laugh at me because I can't get up this wall or whatever. I have no idea how it works. But it's you know, still just, you can interact with them on it. Like be a part of it, do some of the things together, or share the news story with him. Hey, so I was reading about, because it's that connection, that socialization, not just being in this one spot, right? So I think really doing some of those things together and really monitoring how your kiddos are spending their time. And I think this is, maybe this is a good kind of springboard for reflection on, okay, check your screen time thing and see how much, and you'll probably be shocked how much screen time that you have. And so, and then just reflect on okay, how do I want to spend my time, right? And do I need to set some kind of thing to show me, hey, you've really had your 4 hours today already, and then you know what, I'm going to stop reading the news now.
Because then, I have, all of our calendar on, and Lord, how many times do I check that calendar a day?
Right.
And, do your online banking and do your everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Just right there. Order Walmart pickup. I mean, all of it.
Yep.
Right.
Everything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was telling Dr. Nord, I think my frustration first started when they got the Chromebook at school.
Yep.
Because he didn't have a phone, but he got the Chromebook, and it was like, wow. And, it was YouTube, and, I mean, he could get on all that stuff. And I was like shocked. He's 15 as a freshman, but my husband can see how much time he was on TikTok. But yesterday at school, evidently he was on TikTok for at least an hour, and it's like, when are you on this?
And that's when the required teacher's upset.
Right,
yes. Right.
During homeroom, they can do it during homeroom. I'm like, I'm frustrated that they can't monitor them better at school.
I tell you what, there are ways around all of it.
That's true, the VPN.
It's
But he was actually on his phone, and I guess in homeroom they can do that if they don't have homework, they get on their phones.
Yeah.
There was one teacher who took his computer away, he was like, oh, mystery, so and so took my camera, I'm like, good for him.
Yeah.
Why didn't they do that before,
Right.
And he kept it for 3 days, and I'm like, I'm happy he did.
Right.
Now development-wise, because you were talking about kids and nearsightedness.
Woo! We have a trick table here.
And so right now, high school adulthood. So the eyes already developed, the brain's already developed. What are the changes? The reason I asked, I've actually had 3 eye surgeries, and nobody knows why or what, and nobody will say. And I've always said, does it make a difference? What I'm doing, and you can use your eyes as much as you want, it doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
So I just am curious for adults. And again, high schoolers may not have that prefrontal cortex, but
Sure.
in terms of other structures, does it change? Or once you're there, are you there?
Well, as far as just what your environment is like, and just what, oh gosh, do I get into this? There is something to be said for one's, I'll say personality, I'll say their habits, to be more so, I don't want to, to make an example, librarian type, always here. Their whole self, is very much diminutive, right? Kind of to themselves in their own kind of smaller bubble, not one to be extroverted and to be, talking and to be more of a open, kind of personality, if you will. That I have seen adults in therapy where we will start to have conversations about, okay, we need to start to balance the function of kind of keeping more kind of in your own personal bubble to kind of let's open that bubble a little bit and balance out more, like you heard me talk about, convergence, divergence, and how those are coordinated eye movements that need to be in balance with one another to help get into that divergent state to, and I'm making an example as far as to really go to the Grand Canyon and really experience the Grand Canyon. You need to be able to allow yourself to get into that amount of space. And that is a very uncomfortable place for folks who really kind of like to be here. I'm good here. Like, I'm watching the taillights in front of me, and that's all I need. Like, I don't need to be looking 5 cars ahead. I just like right here. I'm good. There's I don't want to say cycle, but it's a contributory kind of effect that will continue in that kind of nearsighted cycle. Is this, I just prefer this, I'm good right here. And so when, and I've done it in patients when I used to kind of fill in for just some primary care work at some point, but folks and adults who would kind of inch up in their nearsightedness, I'm like, I want you to try something. When you're watching TV, I don't want you just to watch the people on TV. I want you to see your whole TV. I want you to see the plants on either side of your TV. And I want you to work on expanding your visual picture and not just look right here. And to begin to expand your visual space, which will kind of help relax just that drive. And that has been helpful. Now, there are exceptions. That there is, if that was your destiny, right, to be really nearsighted, okay, you're gonna be. But as far as, is there a component to becoming a little bit more comfortable and kind of expanding your, comfortable space? Yeah, that can definitely have an impact.
I mean, should you do
Hope that
like
makes
eye
sense.
workouts?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Say what?
Should you do eye workouts?
Oh, well, I talk a lot about opening periphery. That when you have more visual information to go on, it gives you a better sense of where you are and where other things are. So if you're more, kind of tunneled in, you have very little information to go on to make a decision about what where that thing is and your timing and all of that. So as far as a workout, I think for anyone to work on, expanding periphery, being able to see an opening and seeing this over here and seeing this over here, when I can put my attention here, but that doesn't mean I'm ignoring what's here and what's here. I think folks overall kind of tend to tunnel
And
down.
one other thing on that, when you talked earlier about, you were talking about vision, the vestibular system, proprioception, and all
Yes.
together. When those are out of balance,
Yes.
you were alluding to, does the brain then perceive that as a threat? And then
Yes.
that lead to the increased anxiety that the
Yes.
screen time causes?
Yes.
That can add to it, but I think it's multiple dimensions
Yes.
too, but yes.
But the vestibular system is the very ancient roots of vision. That's the only thing newborns have to go on, is what the vestibular system is giving as input as far as eye teaming. The rest is learned as far as eye movements and eye teaming goes. After, we start to really take in our visual world. But that vestibular system and vision, they're tight. It's car sickness, motion sickness, all those things come from a miscommunication of we're not talking well together here.
I think one important thing too is, we can tell our kids these things, right? But until they're convinced that they do need to limit this, I don't know
Yeah.
how successful we'll be in that. So
Yeah.
I would, love to
Or
hear.
just tell me how you feel about that.
Yeah.
Tell me how you feel right now when you're, angrily telling me that it's not fair that you have to empty the top drawer of the dishwasher. This is your thing that you always have to do. How do you feel right now? And tell me why. Tell me why you're feeling this way. Because you did it yesterday and you didn't act this way. What's different? And so they begrudgingly might try to make up something else, right? But, okay, just to start a conversation like that to address. And it isn't just me telling you that this is why. But hey, what do you think? Tell me why it's different. Or talk to me why you're feeling a little, a little more sad since you watched this. What makes you feel that way? And maybe, to start their own minds going about these correlations and why my body feels the way it feels. And maybe I can make a choice on what I want to do with my, time or how I want to be my own advocate on how I feel. And not just wait to be told what to do or, nope, that's it, you gotta be done now, yank. And I know that there's age related, it's like, you can't just do that to a 2-year-old, but, Yes.
Talking about like the proprioceptive, the vestibular, the convergence, divergence, how effective is something like minds in motion? Is it really going to help?
There's some pretty good data on it. There's some good data specifically on minds in motion. And it really seemed that that program started to emerge shortly after you really saw a sharp rise in screen time. So I think it kind of came out of teachers realizing, gosh, these kiddos are not as coordinated as, kids 10 years ago, right? And integration of all the systems, really. So I don't have exact numbers on minds in motion, but I do think there is some good data behind it.
For sure. That it is a way to specifically activate areas that will give the best and most productive processing and feedback. That I know, when I would go and speak to school systems and things about kind of the therapeutic process and kind of how we address these things and scanning and eye movements and tracking, that some of the more veteran teachers would be like, we used to do that. This used to be part of our curriculum. It used to be part of, PE class and things, doing these things, that it shifts, that there, things just weren't the same as when we were in kindergarten or, those early grades like that. And so I think definitely Minds in Motion is a way to, of course it's done in the morning, right? A way to really key into some of those things. And I think it's more, not necessarily to reverse anything per se, but to wake up certain, processes and certain things, to get kids in a mind space and to get some of that gross motor work and some of that heavy work going to kind of satisfy some of those little staples, that motor overflow and some of those things, to kind of, okay, give body what that sort of stimulation that's productive versus really not productive, to get them set up for, active learning.
How often would they participate or have these sort of effects? Ideally daily? I haven't looked at the data.
Right. No, I wouldn't be able to say as far as a timing of it, but I know just in my own, experience in a therapeutic setting that in a kiddo who is maybe a little bit more, on the unintegrated side of things, if I get them moving first and then go to do some of the tracking and some of these things, we get way more productive than if I didn't. So, and it's also, I think, important to know, that it's different to have a stimulatory effect versus a therapeutic effect.
That's true.
That the Minds in Motion, definitely a stimulatory, there's things you're activating, definitely. And it's definitely not to anyone's detriment, right, to do that, but to really kind of get under some of the processes that still undermine would need kind of to go deeper or to be in a different sort of avenue. But no, I think just in general, Minds in Motion is amazing for getting kiddos in a mindset and also in a cognitive way, but also a physical way to really be most productive.
Well, a lot of times those activities that especially focus on the vestibular system and so forth, like, it's better in general, and I can't speak for every single one, but like, say you need to do like, 20 bicep curls a week, right? There's a big difference with brain. If you're doing like 4 reps 5 days in a row versus just doing, let's just do 20, all and get it done at once. It's better to do 4 reps 5 days in a row, really. And it doesn't necessarily need to be 20 reps every day, but just even a couple reps of each exercise. And so it doesn't have to take a long time, just a couple reps of each thing, but more frequently. Does that make sense? Just one other thing to throw out there too for adults, there's, talk in the neurology world, because we always do these cognitive assessments, right? And so we know which parts of the brain start to have difficulty in early Alzheimer's and other types of dementia and other issues. But, they're even talking right now, okay, if we might start seeing, say, an 85-year-old that they're kind of, the map they have in their brain of how to get from here to Target in Evansville or something, that they, we have that map in our mind, right? We built that map, and you store it in a place called the parietal lobe. That's kind of your map of the world. And so, if by the time you're in your 80s, your map system might not be as good, and you might not remember exactly how to get here or there, have a harder time getting around, they're questioning, okay, in, 20 years, 45-year-olds who've never had to just get somewhere on their own and have always used GPS, are we going to even be able to test these things in them? Are they just going to not have good function of that part of their brain because they've never used it? And so they're actually they're telling older adults especially, don't use the GPS all the time, because that part of your brain is going to start checking out, and you really, really, really need that for a healthy brain. So it's interesting. So I've even started turning my GPS off a lot more often. I need to keep that part of my brain healthy. And even just think about it I'm just going to make something up. If I need to go to a specific store in Tell City, if I needed to do that in 1990, I would have to pull out a map and be like, okay, probably write out my directions. I'm going to turn right here, and then when I see this highway, I'm going to take a left and write it out. And then I've got to pay attention to, okay, where is Highway 61 or whatever, and watch for it.
5 miles, and
Yeah, exactly, and I have to be more involved and with that map in my brain, right? You don't even have to pay attention where 61 is, because the computer's going to tell you, right? So definitely just want to throw that out there to kind of reflect a little bit, how much am I depending on this? And when you happen to wander in an area that has no cell service, you realize all of a sudden, uh-oh, maybe I should have written that down before I took off. But that occurred to me a couple years ago. I don't remember where we got on the road that we had no signal, and I was like, I told my husband, thank God I know how to use a map. And I'm like, next time we're going to give our kids a road atlas. They're going to have to map out the whole thing and tell us, so that they get experience with it, right? So, but yeah, so that I thought that was very, very fascinating. Of gosh, we need to keep using that part of our brains. So, any other questions, comments, ideas? Thanks so much for chatting and having this conversation. I think it's really, really important for our youth.
Yes.
Thanks so much for putting it on.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
lots of good information.
Great, so much. Very good.
Do you guys have anything?
The only thing I was wondering when you were talking about that living right here is like when kids start driving after they've been like here,
Yes.
are they actually seeing? I mean, ours is starting to drive. and
Yeah,
it's like-
right? Yeah.
It's like, Max, put on the brakes. Did you not see? They're braking
And
up
honestly,
there.
I-
It's like.
and
yeah.
correct me, but
Yeah.
I kind of, and I don't have kids that drive, but there's like this reluctance to want to drive.
Oh,
Yes.
Really?
Yes, our bus
Yeah.
drivers say that. We were having that talk the other day. I don't know if Chris was in on that, but our bus drivers say that. They can't believe the number of kids that are able to drive, and they'll say, why are you still, not that we won't transport you on the bus, and don't want
Right.
you, but why are you not getting your license? They don't want, so it's
Yeah.
probably the last 2 or 3 years, we've really
Yeah.
seen a rise in that.
I've seen that for a while, and whenever, I mean, all my friends, like on your 16th birthday, you were
Yes.
there getting your
Yes.
license,
Countdown days.
like, not the day
Right.
after your birthday,
No.
on your birthday, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, you're exactly right, like a lot of kiddos.
Why is that?
I listened to a speaker and they
Yeah.
talked a little bit about this, and it has a lot to do with the need to be connected to people. Like when we were younger, we didn't have cell phones, and the only way you were going to see your friends or talk to your friends was either on the telephone with the cord that was 25 feet long that you stretched across the house, or when you got your license, you could finally get together and have that.
Yeah.
But now everybody has this, and they can talk to their friends 24/7, 365. So anyway, that was one of the correlations that the speaker had made.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
Whether
Yeah.
that's true or not, I don't know,
Right,
but
right.
made sense.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that a lot of that, just lack of awareness of your surroundings. And then all of a sudden, you're in a situation where you have to be always aware of your surroundings.
Or when they're in the car,
Is a
they're
big-
little, they either were watching a
Yes.
movie, he was
Yes.
watching a movie, or he had his little iPad or something. Now when he's driving, it's like, where do I turn? I'm like, oh my gosh, we've been here 300 times.
Yeah.
But they never paid attention.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, having no clue.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost, they kind of have to like learn that.
Yeah.
Like they have to catch it up, right?
Yeah,
To
so now
really,
it's like
Girl,
the phone doesn't pay attention.
Yeah.
Overdose.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be if you get too close to it.
I do have a funny story on that. You said when, like, we didn't have that stuff growing up, so I watched what my parents did all the time. And I went to driver's ed, and I used my right foot for the gas and my left foot for the brake, and they freaked out. What are you doing? I was watching my dad, and the car died, so he had to keep the gas on even when he broke, like use the brakes. So I was paying attention. And I got in trouble for it.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, I mean, but kids wouldn't notice that kind of thing. I didn't have anything else to do,
Right.
so I was watching what my dad did.
Right.
And
Yeah, you were aware.
I was
right?
aware.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your surroundings and
Yeah.
I
whatnot.
freaked out my driver's
Well, you
ed.
traveled to get the I Spy games.
Sure.
or,
Yeah.
you
Yes.
know, when you were traveling and going places, or
Yeah.
how
yeah.
you'd look at the road signs and, find ABC, yes.
Yeah. I'm kind of currently in this kind of little window where my olders are old enough to ride in the front seat. They don't have a cell phone. And so, like, we can have a conversation in the front seat. And, the others, now I'm going to be thinking about it every time I have that video on in the back for the others to be watching, whatever. But it is Mr. Rogers. My oldest are like, oh my gosh, Mom. I'm like, but, to just have conversation, like, how was your day? And to have a little space, which, of course, we're always going somewhere, right, to a ball game or to whoever. But then to have a little bit of that in-between time to, it's almost like, hey, even when it comes time, if you're, we're riding together, put your phone down. Like, speak to me, and let's, kind of have a little window of chat time when we're trying to go here or there.
Yeah, and I think, meal times together with no screens, right, is great. Like, put the phones down, everybody puts the phones down and
Yeah.
just be together, right? And yeah, that can be hard with activities. So yeah, just a few minutes in the car, even just checking in and connecting, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much for
Thank you.
coming.
Good job.